Buried in the dunes are the remnants of the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia and their secrets, the dawn of our economic history.
If you're looking at the origins of all of the techniques of enterprise, where was the first interest charge, the first trade contracts, the first money, prices, the first accounting, all of these were developed in a particular part of the world. Sumer in Babylonia, in what is today southern Iraq, and they were all developed by the temples and the palace.
Athens, 2012, 5,000 years later, and the most potent symbol of our current economic crisis. A city and a country in a state of shock, forced into austerity programs in exchange for loans.
After 2 or 3 years of this austerity program, that is of the shock politics, we are facing an economic disaster.
What causes civilizations to disappear and their economies to collapse? What connects modern Greece to ancient Sumer? There was one economic historian who proposed that the answers may be buried with the ruins of ancient civilizations. Economist Karl Polanyi is back in Vienna, tracing the footsteps of her father. Karl Polanyi was born in Vienna in 1886 and grew up in Budapest. He contracted typhus in the First World War and came to Vienna in 1919 as a refugee after the short-lived Hungarian Republic, which he had supported, was crushed.
Ja, bitte schön.
My father was a journalist, and he worked for a weekly economics journal called Der Österreichische Volkswirt. And of course, so there was a deadline, and the copy, he had to finish his copy, his columns, by Thursday night. And he used to smoke. And this room was, you could not see from one side of the room to the other. It was just filled with smoke.
Vienna, once the capital of an empire, was in the 1920s a politically divided city in a country struggling with economic chaos.
My father was living in a Vienna where there was massive unemployment, where there was a very strong socialist party. And they say the Socialist Party of Austria was elected in Vienna from 1918 in every single election until the Civil War.
Karl Polanyi was immersed in Vienna's politics and its socialist movement.
We're going to the Karl Marx Hof. It was the most avant-garde social housing in all of Europe. Vienna in the 1920s, socialist Vienna, managed to turn the class relationship around. That, of course, is what upset Hayek and company, because the financing for the social housing was by taxing the private housing, the private residential housing.
In 1934, this experiment was brutally put to an end.
Civil war flares up suddenly in Austria. The government, deciding to suppress the socialists, countered a general strike by martial law. The strongholds in which the Schutzbund, or Socialist Defense League, hold out are huge blocks of flats built for the Viennese workers by the Socialist Council of the city. The strength of the buildings enables them to prolong resistance for several days, and artillery has to be brought into action against them.
It made a profound impression on me, and I think it was the formative event, I think, of my life, because I have known which side I'm on ever since.
Karl Polanyi left Vienna a year earlier, after being dismissed from his job because of his political beliefs. After the crushing of the Austrian Socialist Party, his then 10-year-old daughter Kari followed him to England. In 1944, Germany and most of Europe are in ruins. Intellectuals like Karl Polanyi had been trying to understand the causes of the collapse of European civilization and to lay a path out of the rubble. For Karl Polanyi, it was a chain of events that began in the 19th century with the faith in the self-regulated free market.
Our thesis is that the old idea of a self-adjusting market implied a stark utopia. Such an institution could not exist for any length of time without annihilating the human and natural substance of society. It would have physically destroyed man and transformed his surroundings into a wilderness. Karl Polanyi, The Great Transformation.
Polanyi's book was translated into dozens of languages, and his ideas found an audience among the new breed of students in North America. They saw their calling in rethinking capitalism after the Second World War.
Chicago is a lady, a lady, a lady. Smile when you call her name.
I came to the University of Chicago in the year 1950, and I suppose my generation had certain interesting goals or concerns. At the top of the list was the question, would we be back in a major depression that we had come through in the 1930s?
Beyond the facade of the skyline swept under the city's rug, teeming millions, never more than a copper coin from starvation.
The second was a new world was opening up. What about third world countries? What could we do for them?
Somewhere east of Suez, where the best is like the worst, a crowded continent swarms with people, with palaces and poverty.
What about inequality? Inequality between countries, inequality within countries. These were the cogent, the compelling issues of my generation at that time. And economics seemed on the surface to be the entry point to address these issues. But once you entered economics, you found yourself in a maze. It was an intellectual maze with no exit. You began with the basic proposition that the economic problem is scarcity in the world, that there's not enough to give everybody as much of everything as they would like. Because the world's resources were limited, they had to be allocated. The best way to allocate them, we were told, was the market economy. We were boxed into the market economy, and it was a form of intellectual alienation from the world's real issues. Economic theory was very much like a meat grinder that turns out hamburger. You put in old bread, onions, ground meat, whatever you had in the fridge, and you ground it together, and whatever else happened, it always came out hamburger. And that was the problem with economics, that wherever you began, you ended up with the market economy. Eternal, omnipresent, inescapable, and totally binding. I felt intuitively that I had to break out. I left in disappointment and despair from Chicago and went to Columbia. In Columbia, it was quite by chance that I saw a course called General Economic History from a man I had never heard of, called Karl Polanyi.
The course that Karl Polanyi taught at Columbia University was based on his own inquiry into the market economy as an ideological system, a view of society organized along the logic of the market.
To help us get a glimpse into the future of this unfinished world of ours, there has been created for the New York World's Fair a thought-provoking exhibit of the developments ahead of us. The greater and better world.
The Future of Capitalism, as depicted in a General Motors-sponsored exhibit in the 1939 World's Fair. A corporate vision of freedom and human needs fulfilled by the free market.
Come, let's travel into the future. What will we see?
Firebird 2 to Control Tower. We are about to take off on the highway of tomorrow. Stand by.
It is the result of a market view of society, wrote Karl Polanyi, which equated economics with contractual relationships and contractual relationships with freedom.
The great transformation, for me, was an intellectual earthquake. The earth opened up. It was that kind of an amazing insight into the coming of the market economy in lockstep with the Industrial Revolution and introducing a new protagonist which had never been introduced before.